This is a special presentation from SomaFM.com.
Hi, I'm Amon Tobin. Oh, yeah, I DJ. I mainly just produce stuff. I guess I'm more of a sort of studio person, but I get out once in a while and play some shows.
When you're performing live, when you're performing your own stuff live,
yeah,
do you feel like you're DJing, or do you feel like you're, isn't that a different vibe than being in the studio?
Yeah, it is, but it's a mixture. It's not like a kind of a DJ set where I'm necessarily like playing, some jams to get people dancing and stuff, although it's nice when people get down, of course. It's more just a kind of an extension of making a record. I see it like as just trying to make new things out of the music I've got and trying to be creative and experiment, really.
So when you play live, what is your, what do you go up there with a bunch of synthesizers? Because when I've seen you play, I just see a bunch of gear sort of in front of you. You can't exactly tell what's going on.
Well, it's electronic music, right?
Yeah.
So there's no live band and there's no emphasis on that, really, and I like that about it. I think there's plenty of fantastic bands out there, and it's not something I'm trying to be a part of.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm asking is, do you come out with like a whole bunch of different sample pieces and then manipulate the samples in real time? Do you? Kind of,
yeah. Like I use decks because I look at decks as kind of the origin of modern day sampling, really.
It's a long form sample player, basically.
That's it, pretty much. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to layer things and make new arrangements out of the tools that I've got to work with. And the great thing about having such a limited amount of stuff like equipment is that you have to be really creative and you have to be resourceful and and come up with new ways to do interesting things.
So give me a little bit of history. Soma FM has been playing you guys since we first went on the air, and your stuff you did as Cujo.
Right.
Did I pronounce it right?
Yeah, sure.
And was that your kind of debut, or were you doing stuff before that?
No, that was my first record. I was really at that time just trying to see what would happen if I mixed genres that weren't really meant to go together and see, because back then it was kind of a new thing. Obviously it's very different now, and my focus is on other things, but at that time it was very much to do with, all right, let's see if we can take this thing, put it in a new context and see what happens.
How long have you been making music?
I guess about 15 years now.
Okay,
well, that's that's the only time I've been doing it without having like a proper job. Anyway, yeah.
When did you first start playing music? Just to play it. How old are you?
Oh, I've been doing that since forever. Really, I guess I started out with it was like a cassette deck, one of those twin cassette decks, and I'd make a radio show actually for the kids at school, and I'd sit on Sunday night and record the top 40 or whatever, and then kind of edit the tracks and get the parts I didn't like out of the tracks and try and make new things out of those.
So you've been cutting up and sampling effectively since forever.
Yeah, since I was a teenager, really. That's what I was interested in, yeah.
So now, it seems like now your more recent music has been more synthetic, more digital, and less samples. Is that correct? Or are you just tweaking the samples so much?
It's really just about manipulation now. Like I said, back in, I guess, the early 90s, it was interesting just to take samples as they were and see what you could do with them. And now the technology's advanced so much more, and there's a lot more room for maneuver between synthesizers and synthetic processes applied to recorded material and sampled material. Yeah. So there's much more of a hybrid going on now, as far as I'm concerned. And so my music is maybe now a little bit less easy to define in terms of, is it sample based or is it synthesized, or is it, it's just I guess electronic, really.
nowadays, these days, do you find yourself using like hardware samplers or using stuff on laptops?
Well, I tried using laptops and it just doesn't work for me because I need to be in a studio where I've got a bit of control over the environment. But I use software samplers. I use Contact a lot. I really like that, and a mixture. It's really a mixture of hardware and software.
What would you say is your favorite instrument or your favorite tool?
I guess. Well, I've been using this compressor. This is super nerdy, eh?
I'm kind of into this myself. That's why I asked.
Well, it's a compressor called the TG1. It's a Chandler compressor, and I love it. So I caress it and tell it stories and stuff. Yeah,
that's awesome. You've done a lot of field recording, and
right.
Is that correct? And you use a lot of those field recordings as a basis now for the samples you're chopping up?
Yeah, I've been getting into that. I've been thinking about that in terms of soundtracks as well, and been quite interested in how a lot of the films I like recently they're very lean on the music and more on the sound design. And I've been interested in building sounds from scratch and from all different sources, and that goes across the board from, like I was saying, from synthesized sounds to like field recordings but the whole thing is about the manipulation. Like the source material isn't as important anymore. It's more about what's done with it. So yeah, I've been out in the field and with microphones and all that, and having fun with that, but using those elements as a basis for the later production.
So when you sit down to make a new record, do you actually sit down and make a new record, or do you sit down to make like a track? And what's your thought process? How do you get into that?
It kind of depends. Sometimes I'll think of it like an album, but mainly I make music all the time, so I don't. It's not like I really stop. So after I have a certain amount of work, I tend to see what works together, because like your interests vary over time, and so it'll be relatively cohesive just by the virtue of the fact that it's been done between this date and this date. So I tend to work more like that, more kind of I guess in that sort of way.
We were at the Yuri's Night, the World Space Festival back in. You did a great set there, and you totally had floored the audience.
That was fun.
I mean, that was a perfect audience for you too, by the way. They're the spacey set, and they were loving it. And it was really great. But it sounded to me like you were experimenting with a bunch of new sounds. An album, is it almost like you're always making this music, like you said, and the album becomes like just some snapshots from the music you've been creating? It
can be, but like the last album I made was definitely a much more focused thing, where I set out with an idea. I just didn't want to get trapped in some concept or some highbrow thing like that. I wanted it to just be a kind of consistent thing. So yeah, for sure. Like the last couple of albums I've made have been more like, all right, let's try and make a body of work that is kind of consistent, within a certain type of sound.
You mentioned soundtracks. Have you worked with many music supervisors and stuff to do sound for film?
Well, there's a film called Taxidermia, which I worked on last year, which is a very odd sort of Hungarian movie. And that was wicked. It was such a cool film, and they, I don't know, it was interesting working with the director in that, because we had some similar ideas, and it gave me a lot of faith in that world, because I've spent some time down in Hollywood as well, meeting supervisors and stuff, and there's a lot of people to talk to, a lot of lunches, and I quite like to just make music really when I can. So I don't know if there's a future in that or not, but I am interested. I mean, I've always been in love with soundtracks.
Like one of your tracks, I think it was a Cujo track called "Sorted."
Right.
I was like, I'm surprised that one didn't make it into a movie yet. It seems like something someone would really come looking for, because this is perfect for a soundtrack. It's like.
Well, man, man, you know, who knows like what fits and what doesn't fit and what reasons, you know. It's not something I'm necessarily like, you know, trying to get into. I like the idea of working with sound in a non-linear way, and soundtracks provide that. So I'm a big fan of existing soundtracks, you know.
Didn't you do a little bit of music for some video games in the past?
I did, yeah. That was interesting because it was like music that kind of had to adapt to a live sequence, you know. So as opposed to like a soundtrack where you do a scene or music for one scene and that always stays the same. This is more like, well, you know, the character could go this way or that way and the music has to change and adapt. So that was very interesting to do, you know.
Would you do more of that, or? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I'm working on a game right now, which of course I can't talk about.
Okay.
But it's very, very hush hush. But yeah, I mean, I'm interested in that, and it's kind of a cool medium because it's still relatively young, you know, and people are still open to new ideas. And like we were talking before, like you were just saying about like why this sound or that track wouldn't get onto a soundtrack, and you have to think about the politics involved, you know. There's an enormous amount of people that need to sort of green light things, and in game soundtracks, even though it's a much bigger market in some ways, you know, there's still a lot of young people, young minds, I guess, fresh approaches, so there's quite a lot of room for maneuver, I think, in that.
Tell me about some of your musical influences.
It's across the board. I mean, I try and keep an open ear, and I listen to a lot of new stuff, but a lot of old stuff too. And I guess one of my first loves is hip hop still, and jungle drum and bass was a big influence on me. And you
don't hear too much of the classic drum and bass coming out anymore.
Well, you need to. It's like there's a spotlight, you know, when things are kind of hot right now, as they say. You know, like those things get spotlighted and you hear them a lot more. But truth be told, there's some exceptional drum and bass being made. But it's just you're not going to hear it unless you look for it. Yeah.
I know, like I was going back through some of my older CDs from that period. I'm like, I was listening to that, which I haven't listened to in a while. I'm like, that was really good. I mean, it's super stylistic, so you tend to burn out if you hear a little too much of it. Well,
the interesting thing about drum and bass is it was, to me, I felt like it was a genuinely forward-thinking type of music. People were really trying to do new things. You know, they weren't trying to be nostalgic or relive some golden era of music in the 70s. You know, it was all about, well, let's try and make something truly futuristic and do things with production that had never been possible before. And that spirit still remains, you know, as small as the genre is. And it's influenced a lot of other types of music which are much more in the forefront now. So, you know, I think it's normal these things go in cycles. Things become, you know, they become very much in the spotlight and then not, you know. And
sadly, sometimes the things that stay in the spotlight for longer periods of time really probably didn't deserve
to stay. Oh man, yeah, but who am we to judge?
You
know what I mean?
Point. You're right.
It's
true.
If
people like it, then that is serving its purpose. You know?
I don't know. See, I'm more elitist. I tend to think more in terms of, well, the thing that's depressing is that there's such a huge market for bad things, but that's always been the way, isn't it? I mean, since day one. So what can you do? What you do is you do what you love, and you hope that catches someone's ear, or that the other people appreciate that too. But you know, I'd never lose any sleep over, you know, the fact the majority of people are into something I have no interest in.
So I understand you've moved to the San Francisco area?
I have, yeah.
How long ago?
About a week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I'm kind of moving now.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very, very pleased to be here. I love it here.
What prompted the move?
I've always loved this city.
You've come here plenty of times before.
Yeah, and
does this mean we're going to hear you playing more often in clubs and stuff around town, or are you going to be in the studio more?
I'll be in the studio more, I think, probably, yeah. But
do you record mostly at home?
Yeah, well, I'm building a studio right now.
Excellent.
And I'm really excited. It's a pretty decadent space, and I'm very excited to spend a lot of time there.
Lots of vintage compressors and EQs and...
Well, you know, I'm building. I'm still collecting stuff. I'm not really a collector of gear, you know. I like to just use what I have, but I've got my eye out on some things.
I don't know, over the years, your music seems to, well, you don't seem to be doing as much down-tempo stuff as you used to do in the past. Okay. Is that a correct observation, or am I looking in the wrong place?
Actually, I've just finished a record which is, it's all down-tempo. It's all like much more based in hip-hop. And it's a kind of a collaboration with a guy called Double Click. It's a project called Two Fingers, which will come out next year. And I've just tried to do something which I'd never really explored before, you know, working like in a complete, it's not even under my name, it's a separate thing, but it was so much fun to do, to get that stuff out of my system, you know, and that's all, yeah, pretty sort of slow tempo stuff. And
I've really loved some of the slower stuff you've done.
Yeah.
Sometimes I see artists, I get the feeling maybe it's just when you perform live, it's more fun to play the really up-tempo stuff live because the crowd gets energized.
Man, for sure. I still play drum and bass when I play out because I love it. I love the energy it creates, and it's the most fun stuff to play, for sure, you know. But I try and keep the peaks and valleys fairly, you know, I guess balanced as much as I can, but for sure in my own stuff I'm paying less attention to what speed it is even, and I'm concentrating more on the quality of the sound, you know, what the sound actually does. And I used to make, like, I have a whole album that's entirely, I think it's 167 BPM. That was interesting to do, but you know, lately I've been varying the tempos a lot more. Yeah.
Are you recording? You mentioned this project was going to be under a different name. Are there other projects you're doing under different names that you want people to know about?
No, right? No. What I'm doing right now is that I'm doing a little experiment where in between making albums and whatever else I'm up to, I'm just putting out tracks which don't fit anywhere onto my site, and I'm selling them direct to the public and hoping that they'll support it so that I can go back in the studio and make like proper full-length records. So I'm just like taking these things which are kind of homeless tracks and giving them this little home on my site, and I've done one every month since June, and I'm going to see how it goes. I'm not sure if I'm going to keep doing it or not, but it seems to be going well, so it's just great to have any outlet, you know what I mean? So right now I'm doing the soundtrack for this game. I'm starting on a movie soundtrack in early next year, and then I'm going to be working on my next album next year, probably spring next year. But in between, you know, like I say, I'm making stuff all the time, so I have to get it out there, and that's how I'm doing it. Hi, I'm Amon Tobin. You're listening to Soma FM.